to my computer. Hi, welcome. Thank you for joining. Super excited to do this call and have Lyndy here as always. And I don't know about anyone else, but I feel like fall is just my favorite time to get reestablished with my own habits and things that I'm working on, thinking through goals. So that's what we're going to talk about today is establishing habits, like sustainability in habits. And I think most importantly, when implementing new habits, giving yourself all of the grace and just how to do that. So no better person to kind of work through that with us than Lyndy. And yeah, so we're going to just jump in. I'll give you, Lyndy, I'll just give you share screen options because I think you're going to share your screen, right?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Perfect. Okay.
All right, cool. I am going to share my screen and yeah, like it was funny when Michaela and I talked last week for a second. I was like, "Oh, I just talked about this with a client today." But I'm actually going to take a little bit of a not only self-compassion but also really understanding self-worth and why that's important when we're trying to create a healthy relationship with goals. I know Michaela and your team are a huge fan of Atomic Habits. I'm a huge fan of that book and his concepts. But I also think it's important that we really understand how goals really can impact our self-worth. And we need to understand what self-worth is in order to have self-compassion for ourselves when we fall short. So, so I want to start. This is an old image that I've used for years. Stop thinking you aren't good enough. As women especially, there's a lot of pressure to do and be everything, and I might have shared this before, but like, I don't think, Michaela, you realized recently we had a conversation where she was like, sometimes when you only have 1% to give, then make sure you give 100% in that 1%. And that's been like really, really helpful for me and some of the goals that I have. So like my 1% I have to give right now is 3 or 4 times a week to hitting in the gym. And because of Michaela being able to like remind me of that mindset, I've been able to fight this tendency of I'm not good enough because I'm not going every day. But I've been
I feel like you're that's actually like a 30, 40, 50%. I mean, that's way more than most people can even do. So that's huge. Yeah. I like 1%. You're going 3 to 4 times a week. That's fantastic.
So, yeah, Michaela and I were joking. Last week was my birthday. She's like, "Oh, what are you doing for your birthday?" I'm like, "I'm going to brunch and I'm going to go take my time at the gym." That sounds kind of funny, but that's what I did for my birthday.
Sounds great to me. As a fellow mom, at least.
So, but the reason that's important, and this thing, it goes back because like when we start, especially like when you're working on whether it be fitness goals, aesthetic goals, nutrition goals, I think if you understand what self-worth is, it makes it a lot easier to understand what self-compassion is. And self-compassion is, how do we show kindness and relate to ourselves when things don't go right? When we feel like we fail, when we feel like a mistake, do we beat ourselves up like, oh, I messed up again? Why do I even try? Or it's like, hey, it's okay. X, Y, and Z happened today. It's okay. You've got a kid sick with strep throat. Strep throat last winter was awful for a lot of people, right? Like, so self-compassion allows us to relate to ourselves from a place of kindness after a difficult event or a difficult situation or what we view as a failing, versus coming from a place of shame where we put ourselves down. But if we don't understand what self-worth is, it becomes that much harder to apply self-compassion when you're trying to make changes and when you're trying to change goals. So self-worth is feeling loved and accepted with all of our flaws, vulnerabilities, and failures. How many of us love to embrace our flaws and failures? I don't. It's hard. And it's learning to embrace those and know that that is part of the human experience, and that your flaws and your vulnerabilities and your failures don't make you less of a human being. So I love this word, reality-based scene of the true mosaic, right? How many of you have seen a mosaic? they're amazing, right? There's so many little different intricate pieces. And like, just if you only looked at one little piece of the mosaic, you're not going to get this big picture. It's going to not make sense. But when you put it all together, sometimes it's this abstract but beautiful thing. So we're like a mosaic. And when we can really recognize that, it's easier to recognize not only our flaws, but also our strengths, our good intentions, and to recognize the successes and accomplishments. I love that it says the inherent sense of value. So I think that's so important when you're trying to recalibrate on goals. And I agree. I think as kids go back to school, the weather's a little bit cooler. It's a really good time to kind of like recalibrate. But if we can come from a place of your inherent sense of value and worth doesn't change on whether you meet that goal to 100%, right? Or are always perfect at doing that goal. Perfectionism actually drives judgment, shame, and blame. So we really want to steer away from perfectionism and work more toward embracing our self-worth and consistency, right? Because consistency will drive that behavior. So just as a reminder, if you guys haven't heard of Brene Brown before, she's amazing. I got introduced to her a long time ago before she was like super, super popular. And it was the first time that I was like, oh, I got to go to therapy for myself and figure this out if I'm going to help other people. So it's just, she describes, so shame is the opposite of self-worth. It's that painful feeling that you're flawed. And because of that flaw, you're unworthy of acceptance and belonging. So shame, when our goals are rooted in shame feelings, oh, I'm flawed. I'm not worthy. I'm not going to make it. I'm not doing good enough in my goals. What eventually ends up happening? For most of us, we stop, right? For most of us, if it's attached to us hating ourselves, putting ourselves down, feeling like we can't do it, we eventually stop that goal. So if we really want to see progress in goals that we're making for ourselves, it's so important that those goals come a place of self-worth and that you're inherently valued to make those goals sustainable. And please, guys, if you have any comments, feel free to jump in. So I want you guys to think about goals and how they relate to self-worth. When you guys think of the word values, what do you think of? I know a lot of you maybe have heard this or thought about the concept of value-based living. So when you think about the idea of goals should be guided by our values, what comes to mind?
Just thinking of everything we cherish in life, like both goals, but also loved ones, everything that makes us happy and gives us energy, like just more general. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think like for me, like a fitness one that's just easy to think of right now. My values, things that are important to me right now are getting outside, moving my body, being in nature. And so I've been trying to think of a fitness goal that could kind of relate to that. And so I've been thinking about doing like some sprint triathlons because that will force me for my exercise to be outside during this, like the months that I really want to be outside and take advantage of that. And so that's like my goal of the sprint triathlon ties into my values of like wanting to be outside, move my body in nature.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
I think
And,
like work goals could be kind of similar. Like, does your work goal tie into your values, or is it going to pull you away from the things you value the most? Or, can you have it be in line? Like, obviously at Hungry Fitness, our work goals pretty usually tie in with our values of like wanting to feel our best and be healthy. And so it kind of need to be both. Like the things we're focused on with our clients are the things that we're passionate about, but we need to also be taking care of ourselves as we work too, or that don't tie together.
Yeah. For example, when I first started, mind and strength is something I've been conceptualizing for a long, long time. And when I finally launched on my own a few years ago, I was going to do it in 2020 and then the world stopped. But when I started mind and strength like full time a few years ago, I thought I valued one thing about it. and I got some business coaching that aligned with that. And then as I delved into it, I was like, wait a minute, this doesn't align with what I want, right? I like doing some online stuff,
Mhm.
but I'm so extroverted, and I'm a classically trained therapist. So like I realized like what this coach was, what she had to offer was really, really good. It did not end up aligning with my value of I really crave in-person community, connection, relationship building. And so I had to pivot from where I thought I was going to
Mhm.
what really is aligned with what I see as building a community for my practice, you know, here in Utah. So that's one thing that like I had to pivot on my goals. And one other value is like you said, like family. Like I'm trying to figure out how do I get my kids involved in some of like, you know, the getting outside, or my youngest, one of my twins has figured out how to ride her bike. And so it's great because now she wants to go outside every day and ride her bike. And so we've been spending time outside. And so when our goals are guided by those values and they fuel us internally, they become easier to keep doing, right? Like if I hate something and I keep trying to do it because I'm told I should be doing it, eventually I'm going to stop. So we have to make sure that the goals and choices you're making align with what you value as well as your needs, right? Movement is a thing we all need, and especially for a lot of us that maybe sit all day. So our goals need to be guided by our needs. But again, is there a way you can meet that need that is pleasurable and enjoyable to you? If you've been here long, you've heard me use the term like joyful movement, because I think that's so important, right? Or a need, you know, more fresh fruits, more fresh vegetables, or whatever, right? Like my son asked for a cooking book. So I bought him a cooking book, and we spent all day yesterday cooking all sorts of different recipes. And by then I was like, that was fun, but I hate the cleanup. I hate the cleanup after doing all this cooking. But it met my son's need and got him exposed to new recipes and getting involved in the cooking process, right? We put fruit on skewers, which my younger kids love doing. So that really aligns with your inherent worth, because one of mine is relationships and connection. So when my goals are aligned with how to build those connections, it becomes easier to try to keep sustaining that goal because it's connected to something I know I inherently need in terms of relationships. So abilities, I think it's really important, especially when we're talking about like fitness goals, right? I saw somebody post online the other day, like a schedule for a stay-at-home mom, and they're like, wake up at 4:20 in the morning. And I saw a lot of comments like, I'm out.
Oh.
And there's a
Yeah,
time
after
in
you're
my life.
up all night, like with kids.
Yeah. And before, right? Especially before I had my twins, I did used to get up every morning at 4:30 and I was working out by 5 a.m. I am not in that stage of life right
Yeah.
now. Kind of stinks sometimes the older your kids get and then they don't want to go to bed. So then you end up staying up later. Anybody
Mhm.
else in that boat?
Yep.
Oh.
Hard.
So you got to make sure it aligns with your abilities and your passions, like we're talking about. Like Michaela's passion of being out in nature, and so then setting a goal about the sprint triathlon, you know, lines up with that. I'm passionate, obviously, about connection and community building and relationships. Right, it's a big part of my job, but it's also a big part of like who I am socially and privately. You know, and our dreams, like when those that and our goals can't always align with our dreams. I get it. Or can't our dreams don't always seem like it's possible.
Right.
But again, if you come from a place of I'm setting this goal because of this, it makes it easier sometimes, right? It makes it easier to keep working on that goal, knowing it aligns with something bigger that's important to you in your life. And you're also setting it from a place of love, not judgment, fear, blame. I got to meet the status quo of what everybody else expects of me. So, um, any comments? I feel like I'm moving fast. So do you guys have any comments or questions? Nope. All right. The second piece is one thing I like to rephrase instead of goals along these lines of how I want goals to be driven is I call them intentional priorities instead of goals.
I like that.
So that it becomes like, I love the word intention and intentional, because then it becomes more conscious decision versus this is an item on a to-do list that I have to check off. So, like I was talking to them right before we started recording of like, yeah, I've been trying to make going to the gym 3 or 4 days a week a priority. And somebody asked, oh, do you usually get a midday break? I'm like, it usually has been all over the place, but last week and this week, I've got it pretty consistent that I'm going to get a break in the middle of the day to go work out, which really helps me with a stress relief, right? Like, I'm finding taking that midday break has been so good for me mentally, which is interesting because I used to always be an early morning riser. But right now I'm at a stage of life where I'm realizing I need a little bit of extra sleep. So my intentional priority is, how can I create a break in the middle of the day to get that self-care for me? I can't get it every day, but 3-4 times a week is pretty doable. Knock on wood. So when you're thinking about your goals and your worth, try to think about, what are my priorities and what can I be intentional about, and why am I intentional about it? Going back to, what are my values and what are my needs? For me, I need the evening time to take my kids to their different activities, to be there to watch them in their activities. So I need that time in the evening. So I had to create some priorities at a different time of the day. So, okay. Goals will be more effective when driven by building connection. So there's a couple of different ways to build connection with yourself, a connection with other people. Let's say you struggle working out by yourself. How does working out with the Hungry Fitness community, even if it's just on the app in your own gym, give you a sense of connection, a sense of community, a sense of not doing this alone, a sense of accountability? We are creatures of connection. So when we have connection aligned with our goals or what we're trying to prioritize, it makes it easier to sustain those connections. The second piece is they're going to be more effective when it's internally driven or internal validation. If you're only doing certain goals to get recognition from other people, how long does that usually last for you guys?
Not long.
Not long.
Yeah, no.
And I think this is something we can see a lot, especially in kids, right? Like they struggle to follow through on tasks because if there's not that outside validation. And I think like one of the hard rules as a parent is for me to teach them, the older they get, how to shift from needing everybody else to tell them they're doing great or what they're doing, to how can they do that for themselves, or how can they calm themselves down and be okay when things don't go as planned. But that internal validation is so important, and that self-compassion comes in there too. Like, hey, you know what, you did a great job. Like, this didn't get done, but you did this instead, right? Okay, priority connection is one of your priorities. And 2 ways you connect is spending time with your family and going to the gym for yourself. But tonight, this family activity was involved, so the gym didn't happen. And that's okay, because you still prioritize one of your top priorities of connecting with your family. Okay, how can I prioritize maybe some gym time tomorrow because it's something I need for connection with myself? So instead of us always looking at things black and white, is always finding, how do we find the gray area? And again, even recalibrate on a daily basis, like, hey, this is how today went. How do I want tomorrow to go? And provide that internal validation. Like, you're doing okay. Here's what didn't go right today. Here's what adjusted, but here's how I can accommodate for it tomorrow or next week, right? So that internal validation is important. The next step is recognizing and enjoying the process, not just the outcome. I'm sure as a hungry fitness team coaches, you guys see this a lot. And I know you guys do a lot with your team and clients about really learning to enjoy the process and building a healthy relationship with food, a healthy relationship with movement. And that's one of the things I love about you guys, because I've in my career, and I'm sure a lot of us have fallen into this trap of, well, if I don't do X, Y, and Z and X, Y, and Z doesn't happen, right? If I do this workout and I don't lose weight, or if I do this and this happens, then it's not worth it, right? If we get so focused on the outcome, we lose so much of what the process does for us. There are so many benefits to a healthy relationship with movement, with exercise, with, fitness, with ourselves, that are not about what other people physically see in you, what they mentally see in you, but are about how you feel your self-worth and you feel your value. And so I think it's so important that as you're doing these goals, recognize and enjoy the process, right? I on Saturday night actually was going to go to the gym, but I was looking, it was such a beautiful night outside, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna go do yard work instead. So I went and mowed the lawn. I spent like an hour. Oh my gosh, we had so many weeds. It was ridiculous. And it's funny, when I first started in my head, I thought, oh, maybe I'll go to the gym after this. But I just felt this like innate, like I need movement, I need something. But you know what? Getting outside and in the dirt feels really good right now. And sometimes it's hard to start, but once you get started, you really enjoy it. And oh, something about pulling weeds and getting those deep roots out of the weeds is so satisfying. And dirt in my fingers, getting connected with nature that way, I ended up really enjoying the process. And I ended up getting some physical activity, getting some sun. My kids got outside and played on their bikes during the time. So it was a goal of mine to get movement. I didn't end up getting it in the way I had originally planned, but I enjoyed the process doing it. So it's important when we're trying to relate our goals, again, to what value do I get from the process that isn't attached to one outcome. And you write those down. Don't forget those, because when things get hard and when you feel like you don't have anything left to give, or you feel like you're failing at your goals, writing those things down that you enjoy about the process is going to help you see yourself through the times when it's harder. This is a quote from a book I read years ago about boundaries. But this analogy and this like imagery has always stuck with me. The process of treasuring involves learning to befriend yourself to become your own best friend and treat yourself as a treasure like the ruby slippers. When you befriend yourself, you watch out for yourself and plan a life you would want your most treasured friend to live, and then protect your life with boundaries that work to keep the bad out and let the good in. So I want you guys to think about that. How do you befriend yourself and treat yourself like you would your own best friend? And what do you do in your life to protect that? Because that's your self-worth, is you're inherently good. Your goals are worthy of you, not the other way around. So that's my final thoughts. Any other questions, comments?
I was just thinking, like, really listening to that inner voice. Like, it's important to be able to set those boundaries, or like be your best friend, to like just get away from all of that, oh, that's going on up here, and then just beyond that, and like what is me, what do I want, what does my intuition tell me, like all of those things. I think that's at least part of the key to be able to be your own best friend.
Yeah. And I mean, we could spend months talking about that, but I think that's like so much of therapy is people rediscovering themselves and rediscovering how to trust that intuition and how to trust their own inner voice and how to let that be the dominant voice, not the inner self critic and not other people's voices kind of like, what's the word, flooding you. So
Maybe also
yeah.
like self-forgiveness. And if I'm going a little bit deeper, like self-forgiveness, if that is, needed in any way.
Oh,
It's a
yeah.
big, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think too, like not being so worried about making the right choices or the wrong choices for yourself. This is something I've been thinking a lot about lately, but just making choices and knowing that like you're making those choices as you learn to better listen to your inner self. And you're not going to always get it right. And that's okay. Like every choice we make is an opportunity for growth and learning. And same with every, like, every time we miss a habit that we want to execute on, like, okay, this is an opportunity to just learn more about yourselves. Maybe it's not the right habit to implement right now. Or maybe you've got some things that you got some roadblocks, whether you're putting them up or you don't have great enough boundaries from other people and you're letting them impede on your ability to execute on this new habit. There's like no shame around that. There doesn't need to be any shame around that. It can just be, what can I learn here and how can I adjust? Whether that's making it easier on myself and not getting in my own way, or setting up some better space and boundaries so that I can take care of my own needs first.
And I think so often it's not only setting boundaries with other people, it's like setting boundaries with yourself. Like,
Yeah.
I have discovered my phone has different modes. So I've actually put on my phone like an exercise mode, a sleep mode. So now there's like specific times during the day where my phone turns off for sleep. When I go to the gym now, I can turn it on exercise mode and it'll play my music, but none of my other apps or things will like ping at me.
Yes.
And that's awesome because I'm sure like you guys, I get, and it's so easy to get distracted by that.
Let me fix that. Let me help you with that. Yeah, that's really cool. And I feel like, I don't know, and maybe just kind of like to summarize, like the biggest, the way we can most serve ourselves with working towards a goal are those two things, like not feeling any shame when we mess up, but then also and setting boundaries and thinking through that inner voice and how to align with those. And then also like really when we think through our goals, making sure, not really making sure, but like seeing how they tie in with our values, and that's going to help us keep going. But then also, shoot, I lost my train of thought on this. You said it and I'm trying to think of what it was. Oh, loving the process. Like falling in love with the process. So not only seeing, okay, how does this goal tie in with my values? Because that keeps you, I think, moving forward with like a clear vision, but also what are the wins like every single day by working towards this goal? And how can I see those? Because otherwise you're going to either quit early because you aren't in love with the process, you hate the process and it's not sustainable, or you're going to see like this process is allowing me to live my best life and I feel better, I feel more confident, I feel more energy. So then when you get that goal, it's a bonus, but really the process is what is changing your life. And I know that.
And then it becomes easier to recalibrate when you fall off track.
Yeah. How can I switch this process? Yes, because the process is really what's adding to my life, not whether or not I hit this goal. And so I think making our processes work towards our goals, but also just seeing the wins in a process, because then you don't miss all of the benefits of implementing new habits. I think I see people miss those all the time. They think I haven't lost this 10 pounds, but they're not seeing that now they're have much more energy. Their workouts are going better. They're able to put on more muscle, like just so many things that they're missing if they don't just assess the process and that biofeedback that's happening, that positive change there. So
exactly. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. You're welcome. Thanks so much, guys.
Thanks for joining. I will get this recording up today and I hope everyone has a great start to their week. Happy Monday.
Thanks. Bye.